Welcome to It's Your Business, a program designed to highlight our local small businesses. I'm your host, Veronica Douglas. On today's episode, we will explore the world of scrap metal recycling with Brandi Harleaux, Chief Operation Officer at South Post Oak Recycling Center. South Post Oak Recycling Center is a Houston-based metal recycler that focuses on buying and recycling non-ferrous and ferrous metals from households, industrial contractors, companies, and government entities. Welcome, Brandi.
Thank you for having me, Veronica.
It's a pleasure having you. So let's start off. Tell us a little bit about your business. How did you get started?
Yeah. So we are, and you already mentioned it, we recycle scrap metal is what we do, simply put. A lot of people say we're called South Post Oak Recycling Center, and I think that they think we recycle everything else, such as paper, plastic, and the like, but we are metal recyclers. Mm-hmm. We've been around 25 years, so we just celebrated our 25th anniversary in May. And it actually started with my mother and father, who actually started the business about 25 years ago.
And is your mother and father still involved in the business? How many family members are actually in your business now?
That's a good question. Yes, they are still involved, even though they're cutting back their hours significantly. That's every first to second generation owner's dream is for the first to slowly back out, but it's by choice. We have about 28 employees right now, but we also outsource a lot. And of those 28, I would say 6 are family members, either mother, father, or cousin, brother-in-law. So we definitely have family members entrenched in the business, but we have what I call an extended family. So the other employees who are extended family.
And where are you located?
Yeah, we have 2 locations. Our primary location is on South Post Oak Road, so it's at 14600 South Post Oak Road. That's the name of the company. And our second location is at 4370 Holmes Road. So both in South Houston, one in South and one in Southwest Houston.
And what are your hours of operation?
Monday through Friday at our main location or our South Post Oak location, we're open 8 to 5:30. On Saturdays, 8 to 4. Saturdays are one of our busiest days, so I always tell people if you want to come in and move even quicker, come in during the week. And our Holmes Road location has a little bit shorter hours, Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4, and on Fridays from 8:30 to 3.
So let's get down to business now. Let's talk about recycling. What exactly is recycling?
It's a good question because I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about recycling. And I think that there's a couple of different ways to look at it. Typically, if you're recycling, you're diverting material from a landfill. Also, specifically, as we look at metals and other commodities like paper and plastic, these recyclables are actually what I said. They are commodities. They have a value. They can be resold for a price, and they can also be repurposed. And so recycling can take on several forms. For us, in the scrap metal industry, I look at something like copper. Copper is 100% recyclable, okay? And what does that mean? That means that instead of, going to dig out new material from the ground, let's say copper pipes from HVAC units can essentially be melted down and made into new copper that can then be repurposed and reused. And so that's the most practical way that I can tell you of something that is recyclable. It literally goes full circle from extraction to manufacturing, melting down, making something new, going back to melt, making something new, going back to melt. It's continuous, very continuous. Now, there are reuse forms that people talk about that also fit within recycling loop. We do some electronics, although the majority of our business is non-ferrous and ferrous, but even things like electronics, people will recycle electronics. And what does that mean? You take a PC, they will replace maybe the hard drive in it, maybe replace the motherboards in it and sell it as a used item because now the guts or the interior of it has made it functional again so that it does not have to be scrapped. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So, when we were younger, we always heard about the reduce, reuse, recycle hierarchy. Can you tell us a little bit about the history behind that hierarchy?
I think over time as a society, we have looked for different ways to repurpose material. And then if you say hierarchy, I look at it almost as a cycle again, okay? So reduce means that if we can repurpose things and they don't have to be forever gone by going to a landfill, or I would say forever out of sight because the stuff stays there, and it can be repurposed, that would fit more in the reuse category, right? Let's take things like cardboard, maybe once somebody's finishing packaging something, they can reuse that box for something else, Recycle is essentially when things can be repurposed into a different form. Okay, so for us, like I mentioned, recycle would be to take aluminum. I love the analogy of aluminum cans. So let's follow this recycling loop, because I would say about 20% of our commodities that we buy are aluminum cans. But those aluminum cans, you get a soda can or a pop, depending on what region of the country you're from, and you drink it, and hopefully that can goes to a recycler like ourselves. And then what happens? We process that, we send it to an aluminum mill, who then melts that aluminum down. They will send those sheets of aluminum over to a soda manufacturer. Let's just say somebody like Coke. They will use that. They will make a new can, and you will have that can, I think, again, if you will, in about 60 to 75 days.
Oh, wow.
That is recycle. And so, like I said, reuse, we talked about that. And reduce, again, is if we're doing those things, then we're not having to utilize material because we already have it on the, accessible.
So why is, recycling important first? Let's start with that. Why is this really important in our communities to do this?
Yep. I think it's important for a couple of reasons. One, I think if you look at yourself as a global and as a worldly citizen, it's more noble, but ideally we're all looking to minimize what we utilize so that we can preserve things longer. That's a more Pollyanna, response for it. But it also, for us, practically speaking, recycling, you can actually make a little money off of it.
Right.
So it's an incentive actually to push materials, specifically in my case, scrap metal, back into a recycle loop, because you can actually get a rebate for it. You can make a return for it. But overall, I think we want to minimize the use of new goods and repurpose or utilize or demanufacture and remanufacture what we are already using.
And South Post Oak Recycling Center, you guys are very involved in the communities.
Yes.
Tell us how you're helping the communities to move to recycling and how you're bringing that to their attention, how easy it is.
Yep. So we're located, we have 2 locations, as I mentioned, in 2 different districts, District K and District D. And I guess I'll preface and start by one of our 7 company values is community. And so we say we give back. And for us, that means having an impact in the communities that we do business. So for us, it's the society. It's the recycling front, and then it's the people front. On the recycling front, when my dad and mother established the business in our location, there was a lot of intentionality around where we were going to build the business. And so I remember, and I even asked my dad, I said, why did you choose South Post Oak Road, at the corner of Brookville? And he said, I was really looking for an area where there was a working class population, where there were a lot of contractors. And so for us, that was electricians, that was plumbers, that was technicians who would be coming home from a day's work, and they actually have scrap metal, whether that be copper, aluminum, to get rid of, that they could actually make a little money on. And so for us, I would say economically, recycling, we have enabled it in our community by providing a location where the working class and anybody beyond the working class, even businesses around us, can responsibly recycle their material, because we commit that we know our downstreams for our material. So that's one way. The second way is we participate in our councilwoman's monthly meetings. They're called Bridge the Divide, that council member Castex Tatum does, and former council member Larry Green used to do, where they would bring businesses together, they would bring the community together, and in that forum, I'm able to kind of educate them about recycling, the benefits of recycling. And then the last benefit, I would say, is just job creation in terms of recycling. We're able to employ people to actually work in the recycling industry, and therefore support over 28 families who also live in the area and who also encourage their kids to recycle.
So let's get busy talking about your business really quick. What type of materials do you accept?
Yes, and I mentioned South Post Oak Recycling Center can sound like a general recycling, but we are specifically metal recyclers. And so for us, that could be copper, that's aluminum, it's brass, it's stainless steel, it's iron, it's tin, and it's even some electronics. So it really ranges, but I would say for us, non-ferrous material, as you mentioned, is anything that does not stick to a magnet, okay? Ferrous material is your iron, is your tin, and that would be almost anything that sticks to a magnet.
So you can test that easily, like you're saying, by going out and getting a magnet and seeing if it sticks or not.
You really can, and all that does is it starts to segregate what type of material it is, and it also kind of gives you some indication as to the value of it. I usually tell people your iron or tin, think of I-beams, think of washers and dryers. Those are things that are more abundant. There's a lot of them. A lot of it here, it tends to be worth less. You know, you get things like copper, you know, which a magnet doesn't stick to, and aluminum. Those items tend to be worth a little bit more.
So if a community wants to have a event where they're going to recycle and get rid of all of their old metals,
yes.
How do they get into contact with you? How does that happen? Can a dumpster be placed in their neighborhood?
Yes, you know, it's a good question. So we cater to both residences, our business to customer, and we do, the bulk of our business is really business to business. And so right now our process is that for residences, so let's just say folks are accumulating aluminum cans, or they have wheels from their vehicles or gutters from their housing, that material is typically brought into us. And from a process standpoint, we weigh it and we pay them for it. And then in terms of businesses that are around us and even further away, if they're generating large volumes, then we absolutely, one of our service offerings is to deploy what we call a bin or a roll-off container, where they can amass up to like 40,000 pounds of material in that. So it's a mixed model. We offer both a drive-in service, you know, that's a covered facility, and then we also do a pickup service for large volume generators.
Elaborate on a large volume generator.
Yes.
What exactly, how much is that?
Yes, it's a good question. You know, we've had a great partnership with many businesses. We've even had some success working with HCC. And so a large volume would be for us, I would say, a minimum of 10,000 pounds, upwards of 40,000 pounds. So what does that look like? Because we get calls all the time. People are like, well, I have a large volume. And a large volume is relative, right? And so let's just say an HVAC technician or an air conditioning company that is replacing units in a school, or they replacing units in an office building, they would likely fill up a container. We work with a lot of machine shops that actually drill parts for the oil and gas industry, and they have what's called turnings or shavings, which is left over after they actually drill, and they will fill up about 20,000 pounds in a container. Yes, we work with some local, I would call them automobile manufacturers, and they're different specialty manufacturers, but they will have sheets of aluminum that they have, and we'll pick up from them about 15 to 20,000 pounds on a weekly basis as a byproduct of the production. And so I would say those that are going to have large volumes are producing metal as a byproduct of their operations. Even I think of oil and gas. We work with some service centers around the city that they have machine shops on hand, or they have service center where they're repairing parts, or they may come across obsolete heavy material that's made of, like, I call them exotic alloys. When they're doing a cleanup, they'll give us a call, and they'll have at least 40,000 pounds that they're looking to get rid of.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, before we take a quick break, tell us how we can reach you on your website.Hat's your website address?
You know, good question, because we just relaunched a new one. It went live this week, but it's southpostoakrecycling.com.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to highlight the success Brandi has had with working with HCC, as well as learn more about her business.
I've seen people's lives change just by attending a class at HCC.
Some of them might not have the financial means to go to a four-year university. That doesn't make them any less quote-unquote smart than the kids who go to a four-year school.
HCC is easy to get to. It's easy to apply and easy to become a part of.
It gave me so much confidence.
Once you finish your 2 years there, you can transition into a four-year university or go into the workforce.
It's affordable, it's accessible, it changes lives.
Welcome back. We're going to finish our conversation with Brandi Harleaux. And Brandi, we left off talking about the success you've had with HCC. So elaborate a little bit more on that success.
You know what? We've had some great success in partnership with HCC. I think it took a little bit to cultivate the relationship, but where we ended up landing, I think worked out really well. So I mentioned that one of the materials that we buy are HVAC units, our AC units, because what's in them essentially are copper coils, there's motors in them, there's copper tubing. So the unit as a whole represents quite a bit of value. And so what we did is HCC was going through a project where they were going to be replacing HVAC units across its different buildings. And so they were going to be bidding out this job to HVAC contractors, but in the development of that bid, I had an opportunity to work with procurement as well as supplier diversity team to build in a component that says the scrap will be sold to South Post Oak Recycling Center. So HCC understood the value of recouping the financial benefit of those HVAC units as opposed to just allowing the contractor to take it and sell it themselves, not even understanding the financial benefit that the contractor was receiving. So it was built into the contract that said all scrap metal will be sold and delivered to South Post Oak Recycling Center, which made it inevitable, you know, that all the material was coming to us and then we issue payment directly to HCC. So it became a win-win, you know, by HCC building that into the contract. They didn't have to handle it. The contractor that they were already paying was handling the scrap metal, and yet they could be kind of guaranteed that whatever arrived at our dock was going to be reimbursed to HCC. And so I would say half of the project has been done. There's still opportunity as we wrap up 2019. I can't believe it's a wrap up, but in 2019 and maybe into 2020.
So is that how you're helping other government entities as well?
Yes. And so we work with one of the counties around Houston that also has scrap metal. They generate scrap metal from their yards or their sites that they have. If they're replacing, let's say, toll booths that are made of stainless steel, those items come to us. Even signs that you see around the freeways, that's all city and state property, and those things can be recycled and replaced. And so we have an opportunity to work with them in that capacity.
Now, going back to the AC units, now a commercial unit and a residential AC unit are obviously very different. So if a resident comes in with a AC unit, what's the process?
You know, I think it's a great question. I think a lot of people think that it is seamless to recycle scrap metal. Fortunately, I would say, or even unfortunately for business sometimes, there's a lot of regulations for people to sell scrap metal. But the good news is it reduces metal theft. And so there is a process for residents to bring in an HVAC unit. So in order to sell or scrap an HVAC unit, you have to have a receipt showing proof of a new purchase, or you have to have an HVAC technician's license to sell it and get money. Why? Because you nor I want somebody stealing our HVAC units and then selling it at scrap, where they will make a decent amount of money on it, but the replacement of a new one far exceeds that value. So bottom line, there are credentials required for an individual to come and sell a unit, but the intention is really to try to mitigate metal theft and to protect people from having their material stolen from them.
Do we still see a lot of that out now with people stealing HVAC units?
You know, it has reduced greatly. I think that the city and state laws that have been put in place are very laborious for us as business owners, but I do think that some of the impact has been a reduction in theft. You do still see some theft out there, but I really believe that if people and business owners are following the protocol that we should be, which is taking valid identifications, taking receipts, that really does minimize it. Unfortunately, there are bad actors that in any industry, and if they're buying it without those credentials, then you'll still see theft. But we're seeing a huge reduction in metal theft, which is good.
Now, what about vehicles? Do you
Yes.
accept vehicles and the whole and part?
You know what? We don't take the entire vehicles. We will take parts of them. And we get that call quite often, and it comes in. We will take motors. We will take the aluminum hoods or the fenders. We will take harness wire. We will take the rims. But we personally don't take the entire vehicles.
And is the same type of identification is required to bring something, parts of a car into your center?
Yes, essentially, if you bring anything other than aluminum cans, you have to come in with a valid U.S. ID, which was a state law change because we used to be able to take any country's ID, but the past 6 years, you have to come in with a valid U.S. ID. We also set you up for essentially a card or another form of identification that says that you're authorized to get cash. And we pay in two forms. We do cash or check. With the businesses that we work with, I would say it's primarily 50-50. Some businesses want cash. You know, they want to use that cash to do barbecues or do other incentives for their employees. The other 50% wants checks, and it goes directly to the treasurer's office or their CFO office.
So let me ask you this, since we're talking about cash. Do you have to report that to the IRS if you get over a certain amount of money for the recycling that you turn in?
You know, right now we have a lot of financial laws, you know, and obligations. Fortunately, right now, scrap metal, you know, benefits are not reportable.
Okay.
You know, it's not reportable at all. And it's actually something that I hope it's not reportable. It's kind of the benefit that people get from recycling. You know, I used to live in California, and I know that there were rebates, let's say on plastic bottles, where you would get money back because you recycled. We don't have a rebate system here in Texas, but you know, in terms of the benefit, I would say it's more equivalent. It's your benefit or the person's benefit for recycling, which then helps society as a whole.
So if I hear you correctly, you cannot walk up or you cannot ride a bike to your
Right.
center.
Right.
You have to be in a registered vehicle with
Yes.
a driver's license.
You do, you do, and that is absolutely the process. Especially if you, like I said, an individual recycler, somebody from a house. Businesses, on the other hand, like I said, one of the services that we provide is that we will go pick up their scrap metal for them. We realize that they're not in the business of generating scrap, and because they generate a large volume of aluminum or copper or brass, we actually will go deploy a container. The company loads it, and then we will pick it up for them. So that is a service, and then we will issue payment within 24 hours to them. And so the laws or the regulations are slightly different, you know, for businesses where they just have to be a registered legal entity for us to do business with. And then the process, I would say, is a lot less cumbersome.
What about the container sizes when you do drop them off commercial locations? Is there permits required? Do you have to notify the city?
You know,
what does that look like?
That's a good question. Well, obviously, all of our property, we track it and we log it and we have it in our sophisticated databases where we know where all our containers go. But no, it's our property. It would just be a service that we offer. We do 20-yard, 30-yard, and 40-yard containers, and we also do bins and barrels, just depending on the needs of the company that we're working with. Typically, myself or one of our sales reps will go out and assess the type of material that a company is generating. If they're generating 10,000 pounds of aluminum on a weekly basis, then we'll determine what type of container that they need to support that. If they're generating a lot of turnings, we may deploy a roll-off container or Gaylord boxes. And so for us, our approach is really to take more of a consultative approach with our customer who's generating scrap to understand, you know, what is it that they need? How can we minimize the space that they're using to store their material until we get ready to pick it up? So no license is needed to go out there. That's all kind of fits under our business model entity, but the containers or whatever we deploy is a part of our service offering.
Now, what is a Gaylord bin? Is that the one that has the doors?
I like it. You're on it, Veronica. A Gaylord box is typically just a large 4x4 corrugated cardboard box.
Oh, okay.
So it's just in other words, it's a heavy-duty cardboard box that can hold or house a lot of information. What you're asking about are those roll-off containers or roll-off bins? Some people call them dumpsters, you know, because they have open tops, you know, and so, you know, I just have to communicate with people in whatever language that they know. So it could be a roll-off container, open top box, a dumpster, all of it. For us, it's a roll-off container because we deploy it on a roll-off truck, a truck that has has the capacity to hold it, store it, and then drop it at your facility.
So in a residential area,
Yes.
can someone have this in their driveway or the street?
Yes. If people typically have a roll-off container in there, it's usually because they are doing some demo work on their home. And so they might have a lot of, they could have concrete or drywall, and some of that would go to a landfill. If we're deploying a container to someone's house, it's usually because they're gutting a lot of metal, specifically aluminum or copper. That's not tend to be who we target because they can't usually fill up a bin. But for our residences, I would say some people are putting their aluminum cans in the recycle bins on the corner. I say put them in a different container and bring them on over to South Post Oak Recycling, because you can make money for them as opposed to sending them to our local MRF.
And so there's a lot of different types of waste, and one that we kind of touched on, but I'd like to elaborate on it a little bit more, is e-waste.
Yes.
Tell us what e-waste is, and tell us what things that you accept at your center.
As far as e-waste, folks, some people call it electronics recycling, some people call it e-waste, some people say, what do you do with electronics? Electronics recycling to us is essentially diverting electronics from the landfill as well. And just like metals, electronics have to be segregated. So what we take primarily are PCs and laptops. We do partnership with the City of Houston. They have an environmental services center down the street from us, and they will take things like monitors and what we call the ancillary parts like keyboards. But our focus is really, I would say, on the more valuable pieces of electronics, which would be PCs, the actual towers, as well as laptops. And so then what is waste is interesting because I guess in our current vernacular, we don't really refer to recyclables as waste because the way we look at it is recycling is not waste. Waste would go to a landfill, and something that's recyclable can be reused. And so in that vein, electronics can definitely be reused or recycled. And recycling would mean that they would be probably disassembled, and we take out the different components of them because they include copper, they include a little bit of aluminum in them, as well as other materials, and then that would be recycled or scrapped.
Can you give us, a real quick tip on how to clear your personal information off of the PC before we drop it off at your location?
Yes. So there are several forms of what they call data destruction. So I will back into it. There are companies and there are recyclers that specialize in data destruction, which means that they will wipe everything from your PC directly. You can also buy those devices at places like Best Buy and wipe your hard drive yourself. The less sophisticated, you can essentially damage your hard drive, however you want to damage your hard drive, so that data is completely destroyed or it can't be retrieved. So again, there's the more, I guess, sophisticated or appropriate where you would actually buy the software to wipe it yourself. You would damage it, or you would work with somebody like us who actually works with a data destruction company, and they will destroy the data.
In closing, Brandi, please tell us again your website, your business hours, and your location.
Yes, so South Post Oak Recycling Center. Website is southpostoakrecycling.com. 2 locations to serve the greater Houston area and beyond. And so one is at 14600 South Post Oak Road. Our second location is at 4370 Holmes Road, both in South Houston. As mentioned, we do pickups for large volume generators, which tend to be companies or government entities, and we welcome any residents in. In terms of our hours of operation, the South Post Oak location is open 8 to 5:30 Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 on Saturday. And then our Holmes Road location is 8:30 to 5 Monday through Friday, and 8:30 to 3 on Saturdays. This has been awesome.
Brandi, I'm so happy to have you on. You've changed my whole outlook on recycling.
Yes.
I will start using my bin.
Yes.
I have plenty of things that I can bring my scrap metal down there to you.
Great.
I appreciate everything you've done for Houston Community College. It's a pleasure serving our small businesses. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
For more information about HCC's Small Business Development Program, please visit our website. For It's Your Business, I'm your host, Veronica Douglas.